Hey there, my friend. This is Dave Wood, and I just finished reading Bill Gates' book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, the solutions we have, and the breakthroughs we need. And I wanted to share my thoughts about the book. Originally, I picked up this book because Bill Gates is a well-known billionaire, and I have some kind of interest in environmentalism as well. I decided to read it recently as I was talking to my dad about climate change, and I realized that I really don't know much about it. In addition, I was about to catch up with an old friend of mine, Jonathan Budd, who owns a company called Power, a solar energy network marketing company that did $359 million in sales last year. I figured if I read a book about climate change, it would better synchronize my mind to his before we talked, as I hadn't caught up with him in a few years and I wanted to see what he's up to. Well, Bill Gates starts off the book by saying there are two numbers you need to know about climate change. The first is 51 billion. The other is 0. 51 billion is how many tons, not pounds, tons, of greenhouse gases the world typically adds to the atmosphere every year. Although that figure might go up or down a bit from year to year, it's generally increasing over time. This is where we are today. 0 is what we need to aim for to stop the warming and avoid the worst effects of climate change. And these effects will be very bad. Humans need to stop adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Now, I have to admit, I still don't know tons about climate change. I was talking to another friend of mine who's a best-selling author about it, and he said, quote, "I think that climate change is a scam," end quote. We discussed it a bit, and I said, quote, "One thing a lot of reading has done is it's shown me that I just don't know much about most things. So where I don't know much, I try to keep my opinion more observant and neutral until I do," end quote. I don't understand the climate stuff. I know that the air stinks in big cities like New York, and it snows less in Alaska than it did when I was a kid. The stinky air is pollution. Not sure if that's causing the reduction in the snow in Alaska. Now, he agreed with that. I definitely learned a lot in the book, though. For example, I learned that 1 billion people didn't have reliable access to electricity, and that half of them lived in sub-Saharan Africa. He even had a photo of an African reading a book under candlelight at night that I was mesmerized by when I saw. See, we take things like electricity for granted so much that it doesn't really cross our minds very much that 1/8 of the world can't just flip on a light switch at night or refrigerate their food. This, of course, creates an issue because more of the world needs access to good energy so they can thrive more and prosper. However, we're also putting 51 billion tons already of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere every year. Bill comes to 3 main conclusions in the book. Number 1, to avoid a climate disaster, we have to get to 0. 2, we have to deploy the tools we already have, like solar and wind, faster and smarter. And 3, we need to create and roll out breakthrough technologies that can take us the rest of the way from the gaps that are going to appear from those other 2 solutions. I had never really thought of the idea before of getting to 0, which of course is a big change. However, the only real way that something like that would be possible is through technological breakthroughs and engineering. I used to argue with my brother Johnny about this idea. Johnny believed that humanity needed to return to the rivers and forests. I used to argue with him as we'd been hiking along the trail, basically that if we just all returned to the forest together, we'd just cut them down and build cities there, and the problems could be solved instead via architectural and engineering breakthroughs. He would then say to me, "Well, we need to stop doing that and live in nature instead," to which I would respond, "That won't work with 8 billion people." And so on our conversation would go. One thing that I've noticed is that certain demographic groups argue against climate change and think that it's some kind of massive scam to control the populace. I personally think that there's elements of this that might be true, as the world's so filled with propaganda, particularly from politics, that it's hard to decipher what's true from what's not true without really getting into the details and the science of it. However, the science that I've actually read so far that's talking about climate change is far superior to the arguments from people that think it's a scam. That's just very simple to observe. Some of both sides and what they say are useful to look at, though. For example, one of the main arguments that I've heard against the climate change people is that Earth has been going through in climate cycles since it has existed. During the Mesozoic era, which was 250 to 66 million years ago, the world was between 6 and 9 degrees Celsius hotter than it is right now. The last ice age was 5 degrees Celsius colder than it is now. What is to say that the Earth won't just flip into an ice age again? Bill talks about some of the mechanics that made the Earth cooler and hotter in this book, but doesn't really resolve this Kármán argument, which states that the world has been moving in heating and cooling cycles for millions of years, and this will happen regardless of what humans do. One thing that I do agree with from the book is a statement that Bill Gates has, which is the only solution I could imagine was to make clean energy so cheap that every country in the world would choose it over fossil fuels. So here is his argument for getting to zero emissions. The reason we need to get to zero is simple. Greenhouse gases trap heat, causing the average surface temperature of the Earth to go up. The more gases there are, the more the temperature rises. And once greenhouse gases are in the atmosphere, they stay there for a long time. Something like 1/5 of the carbon dioxide emitted today will still be in the atmosphere in 10,000 years. I must admit that I did not know the bit about 1/5 of the carbon dioxide staying in the atmosphere for 10,000 years. I do know that it stinks in places like New York City, and it would be nice if it didn't. I also don't think that people are going to stop doing what people do anytime soon. Whatever solutions that we come up with for healing the planet and removing pollutions have to be systemic and based in better, more efficient technology, or they'll never have the mass movement that they need in order to change fast enough to make any big-time difference. I did learn in the book that the mean temperature has gone up about 1 degree Celsius since pre-industrial times, and some places have already started experiencing temperature increases of more than 2 degrees Celsius. These regions are home to between 20 and 40% of the world's populations. He also warns we've already raised the temperature at least 1 degree Celsius since pre-industrial times, and if we don't reduce emissions, we'll probably have between 1.5 and 3 degrees Celsius of warming by mid-century and between 4 and 8 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. Having the global temperature rise by minute amounts actually has catastrophic consequences. He also warns if the temperature rises by 2 degrees Celsius, coral reefs could vanish completely, destroying a major source of seafood for more than 1 billion people. The problem with predicting the future is, of course, that there are so many variables that it's generally impossible to know with any kind of absolute accuracy what's going to happen. Stock market experts can't predict what the market's going to do 5 minutes from now, and we've all grown up watching weather forecasts and seen that in general, the weather experts don't know what's going to happen later today with any kind of absolute certainty. However, what I've also noticed is that it's generally easier to predict longer-term trends if certain indicators can be quantified. For example, certain human behaviors are predictable. If more of the world has access to energy, they're going to use it. People are going to use the energy that's cheaper more than they'll use the energy that's cleaner. People are not going to stop building homes and infrastructure, and they are not going to stop eating the foods that they like. The issues that face humanity are systemic issues and are interwoven between political musings, economics, basic human desires, and the current state of technological breakthroughs. It's not just the rich world. Almost everywhere, people are living longer and healthier lives. Standards of living are going up. There's rising demand for cars, roads, buildings, refrigerators, computers, and air conditioners, and the energy to power them all. As a result, the amount of energy used per person will go up, and so will the amount of greenhouse gases emitted per person too. Even building the infrastructure will need to create all this energy. The wind turbines, solar panels, nuclear plants, electricity storage, facilities, and so on will itself involve releasing more greenhouse gases. One thing I noticed about Bill Gates in reading How to Avoid a Climate Disaster is that he doesn't just see a big picture. He sees things on a massive scale that's difficult for most people to grasp, which is one of the difficulties of solving such grand problems in the first place. People have a hard time understanding how they can do anything about it. Human population is not declining but growing, and standards of living are not going down but going up. Overall, we're going to continue to do what we've been doing, and if there's a problem to be solved, it needs to be solved on a systemic scale, not on an individual one. Case in point, since we've been children, we have heard about the values of practices such as recycling, but the fact is that the majority of people cannot be bothered to recycle. They'll buy groceries and put the waste in the trash and throw it away without any regard whatsoever for ecology. Yes, some people will take forethought in advance and organize their trash in such a way as to be ecologically balanced, but not enough people will do it to move the needle of the world enough to make a difference. In order to recycle through the vast amount of human waste that is produced every day, automated systems need to be built that function on their own without the mass populace understanding how they work, or it's just never going to happen. Many of these kinds of issues being solved from breakthroughs in robotics and technology, artificial intelligence, and properly formed legislation. The problem is in relying on humans to do it on their own. As history has proven, people will simply repeat their patterns, and if they are destructive patterns, civilization will continue in the absence of technological and economic breakthroughs to repeat their destructive patterns until the society has collapsed entirely. For example, one of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions is simply construction. We're not building less cities, but more. Bill Gates points out the world will be building the equivalent of another New York City every month for the next 40 years. While some kinds of technology improves exponentially, some does not. It is not as fast to improve a coal plant as to improve computer chips. He also points out the following. A computer chip made today has roughly 1 million times the transistors on it than one had in 1970, making it about 1 million times more powerful. If computer chips can improve so much quickly, can cars and solar panels as well? Unfortunately, the answer is no. Consider that the first Model T that rolled off Henry Ford's production line in 1908 got no better than 21 miles to the gallon. As I'm writing this, the top hybrid on the market gets about 58 miles to the gallon. In more than a century, fuel economy has improved less than a factor of 3. Overall, the pattern that humanity is running is to grow bigger, faster, and more efficiently, and we pollute as much as we are going to pollute along the way. The biggest breakthrough that we have had in this area, they've helped, but in the overall picture are barely making a dent in the problem. For example, my friend Jonathan Budd owns one of the top 10 solar companies in North America, and as of writing this, they've helped more than 3,115,991,119 pounds of carbon dioxide be removed from the atmosphere. However, this works out to be about 1.5 billion tons, or 0.00305% of the problem. Is that helpful? Well, absolutely. I would even say that he has moved the needle and he's on track to move it a lot more. Overall, though, human population is simply expanding and exponentially expanding at that. Many times we think of pollution and what comes to mind are things like cars, as there's obvious smoke coming out of them, and also electricity because we run our houses with it. According to the book, 31% of pollution is caused by making things such as cement, steel, and plastic. 27% is caused by electricity. 19% is caused by growing things such as plants and taking care of animals. And 16% is caused by getting around in cars and airplanes. And only 7% is caused by keeping warm and keeping cool. So you can see that the majority of solutions, which is companies such as Tesla and Power, like my friends own, if they attained a 100% market share and all electricity and transportation became sustainable, which it won't from these solutions, although the solutions will make a positive impact, we're still only solving 43% of the problem, as civilization is going to continue to expand at a more rapid pace each year than it did the previous year. In How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, he talks about nuclear fission as a part of a solution to the problem of sustainable energy. He says, here's a one-sentence case for nuclear power. It's the only carbon-free energy source that can reliably deliver power day and night through every season, almost everywhere on Earth, that has been proven to work at a large scale. No other energy source even comes close to what nuclear already provides today. Here I mean nuclear fission, which is the process of getting energy by splitting atoms apart. We'll get to its counterpart, nuclear fusion, in the next section of the book. The United States gets around 20% of its energy from nuclear plants. France has the highest share in the world, getting 70% of its electricity from nuclear. Remember, by comparison, solar and wind together provide about 7% worldwide. Nuclear has problems, but overall can be safely utilized today as a part of a global solution for power generation and energy distribution. Even if the entire world started driving electric cars right now, the electricity the cars are charged with is many times generated from burning coal or oil. So unless the electricity the cars are charged with is also sustainable, electric cars alone cannot solve the issues generated by transportation emissions. Overall, Bill's book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, is a good exposure, potential issues, and solutions to the problem that we're going to have to solve in our age of the world, which is how human beings are going to move forward with technological progress and at the same time do so in a way where we're building a world that will thrive through coming generations. Will the technological age end with the destruction of humanity, or will we adapt and change to the point where we not only survive, but we also thrive through the future ages of the world? One thing's for certain, these are real problems that need to be solved right now. Bill Gates goes into an overview on many issues and their potential solutions in the book, but at the same time, he is clear that the issues are not solved. The book is a call to action for humanity to work together with scientists and governments to solve the crisis of civilization, destroying the planet as it grows and making it difficult to inhabit for the future generations of the world. Personally, I want my son to grow up in a world that has clean air and water and is habitable. So the book was a good introduction to these ideas, although I need to read perhaps 30 or 50 more books on the subject before I would consider myself educated on these ideas. Right now, it has increased my general awareness of the subject, as well as shown me some useful thinking frameworks to toss the problems around in my head as I meditate on these ideas and potential solutions to them. Bill Gates is one of these people that gets a lot of blowback online. Some people think he's an evil supervillain who's out to wipe out humanity, and others feel that he's a genuine philanthropist who's doing his best to fix issues that are beyond the grasp of most people. I tend to fall in the latter category, as the only impression I get from reading the book is that this is a person who deeply cares about the future of humanity and who wants to do his best to solve problems. Some of his ideas can help. He says in the book, this isn't primarily a technological problem. It's a political and economic problem. People cut down trees not because people are evil. They do it when the incentives to cut down trees are stronger than the incentives to leave them alone. So we need political and economic solutions, including paying countries to maintain their forests, enforcing rules designed to protect certain areas, and also making sure rural communities have different economic opportunities so they don't have to extract natural resources just to survive. The observation that people are simply doing what people do and that their intentions are generally not malicious is a good one. The issues are not individual, they are systemic, and they need to be solved at a systems level. One thing that people sometimes think is, if we're polluting more, just plant more trees to clean up the air. Well, this sounds like a good idea. He points out in the book that taking all these factors into account, the math suggests you would need somewhere around 50 acres worth of trees planted in tropical areas to absorb the emissions produced by an average American in her lifetime. If you multiply that by the population of the United States, you get more than 16 billion acres, or 25 million square miles, roughly half the land mass of the entire world. Those trees would have to be maintained forever, and that's just for the United States. We haven't accounted for any other country's emissions. Overall on this issue, I think that ignoring it is societal suicide. But at the same time, I don't think that we have the best solutions to solve it right now. The solutions need to come through a combination of technological breakthroughs, political upheaval, and a lot of work from many smart people working together. Can we solve it in time to avert the worst kinds of disasters? Yes. Will we? Well, that's a good question. Do you know the future? I don't. From our history, the likelihood is that we won't do anything about it of significant with enough scale to solve it before the destruction is causing enough pain for us to do something about it. Unfortunately, that may be too late. But what do you think about it? I would like to know your thoughts in the comments, and let me know if you also pick up a copy of the book, which is going to be linked to below this video. Do I think that this book has the solutions that humanity needs to move towards a sustainable future? Not all of them, but he definitely does a good job at outlining some of the challenges that we're going to have along the way. His views are deeply practical. He understands the challenges that we have on both a large vision scale and a practical local scale. The facts are that the breakthroughs that we need are simply not developed yet, and that we face the breakthroughs that we have, the fact that political systems are not unified and move far slower than technology and are often driven by personal agendas and also vendettas like we're seeing across the world. Can a bunch of disconnected national governments who often feud over resources work together for the betterment of humanity in a way that maintains autonomy and individual liberty? Not likely with the way things are right now. However, I tend to believe personally in the future of humanity and our ability to solve major world problems if we work together. But what do you think about it? That's what I want to know. Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know if you pick up a copy of the book. Again, it's linked to in the comments. Obviously, I read a lot of books. This is one that I highly recommend by Bill Gates. Bill Gates, if you ever see this, thank you for writing the book. And if you want to follow me on the internet, you can do so at my blog at workwithdavidwood.com. This is Dave Wood again, and I'll see you on the beaches of the world.